So far in JavaScript, we focused on straightforward pieces. Do this, then do that. But life is more complex. Often you need to do this or do that, depending on some information or circumstance. In this lesson, we introduce the syntax and rules for a couple of the more interesting logic structures of JavaScript, the if statement and the for statement. The if statement. This statement allows you to test some condition and to execute one or more statements if the condition is true, and optionally a different collection of statements if the condition is false. Syntax: if, and in parenthesis a condition test. In braces, one or more statements. Else, in braces, one or more statements. Possible condition tests are discussed shortly. The else phrase is optional. Watch the punctuation. There's parentheses around the condition test, but no semicolon after the condition test. And there's no semicolon after the braces, which delimit blocks of code. But there must be a semicolon after each statement in the braces. Both if and else can be empty, that is, contain just a semicolon, which is a no-op or empty statement in JavaScript. If either set of statements contains just one statement, the braces are optional, but recommended. So here's the condition tests. The value identified as condition test may be any one of these. First, a literal or a variable, in which case if the value is a non-zero number, the condition is true. If the value is a string of length greater than 0, the condition is true. If the value is an object reference, the condition is true. If the value is a Boolean type with value true, the condition is true. In all other cases, the condition is considered to be false. Or the condition test could be a relational expression which evaluates true or false. One operand, a literal or a variable or an expression, is compared to another operand, another literal or variable or expression, where the comparison operator is one of these. Equals equals for equality, that is, they have the same value after any necessary type conversions. Not equals, that is, exclamation equals for not equal. A less than sign for less than. Less than equal for less than or equal to. Greater for greater than. And greater equal for greater than or equal to. Or it could be a combination of expressions connected with the logical operators ampersand for a logical and, vertical bar for a logical inclusive or, that is, one or the other or both, and an exclamation point for a logical not. Note, there is no exclusive or operator, that is, one or the other but not both, but you can build this functionality by simply testing with multiple operators. For example, expression 1, vertical bar, expression 2, so that's inclusive or, and not expression 1 and expression 2. There's some other possibilities, but they're beyond the scope of this course. Here's an example. On click equals, quote, if this.style.color equal, quote, red, all in parenthesis, this.style.color equals blue, semicolon, close quote. Note the punctuation, especially the open and close single quotes and double quotes. Also, note the line break. That's totally up to the user, as is indentation. Note the use of equals in the condition test. A common error is to use a single equal sign in this location, but that would make it an assignment statement, not a conditional test. Finally, note the second line does not have braces. Since there's only one statement to execute, the braces are optional. Now, many people code braces even when there's only one statement. It makes it easier to add more statements later and to not forget to add the braces because then they are necessary. Here we put an if statement in the context of a p element start tag. So P on click equals double quote, and look all the way down to where the end of the double quote is. If A bold equal false, then brace this.style.fontWeight equals bold. That's one statement, and then A bold equals true. That's a second statement, so the two of them are in the first set of braces. And then else, and a brace. And this.style.fontWeight equals normal. That's the first statement. A underscore bold equals false. That's the second statement. Again, two statements within the braces. And then the greater than sign indicating the end of the start tag. Click this text to swap between bold and normal, and then the end paragraph. So especially note the location of the closing greater than for the start tag, as I pointed out, in addition to the opening and closing double and single quotes. Now the code, if A underscore bold equal false, could also be written if not A underscore bold. But in any case, for this to work, A underscore bold has to be defined somewhere. We can't define it in the on-click handler because then it would be reset on each click, so you could never get back to normal. In this situation, A underscore bold is called a local variable because it is known only within the event handler where it is defined. To create variables that are known throughout your page, you need to use a new element in the head element, script. So here's the syntax. A script start tag, possibly some attributes, then your script content, and a script end tag. Both the start tag and the end tag are required. There's one particularly useful attribute, src, source. It's the name of a remote script, and we'll talk about those in the next video. There are some other attributes, but they're not of interest in these courses. The script content can be a set of variable declarations, in which case these variables are global. This is how we get variables known throughout the document. They could be JavaScript statements, in which case they are executed as soon as the page is being loaded. And they could be JavaScript functions, which we'll discuss later. These are only executed when they're actually requested. So we might have something like this. Here's our head element, and within that we have a script element, and we define var A underscore bold equals false. And in the body, here's our P element with the logic we talked about earlier. And it works like a champ. JavaScript arrays. We'll get to the for statement shortly. But first, we need to introduce the concept of arrays. An array is a collection of values, a set of values. In JavaScript, an array has a name which you make up. And to reference a particular item in the array, you specify the name of the array followed by an integer in brackets. For example, countries 1. The value in the brackets is called an index. Indexes are zero-based. That is, the first item in the list is item numbered 0. If the elements in an array are objects, you can reference a property of a specific element by following the index by a dot in the property name. For example, images5.src. You can define an array using the var statement. For example, var countries equals new array, paren. Arrays are objects, therefore they have properties and methods. Use of the new constructor creates a new array object with the specified name. Here, countries is an object of type array with an indeterminate number of entries. Entries in an array may be initialized by assignment statements. For example, countries 0 equals Albania. Countries 1 equals Algeria. You can also initialize entries at the time you define an array. Var countries equals new array, parenthesis, Albania, comma, Algeria. Alternatively, you can create and initialize an array by simply listing values in a pair of brackets. For example, var countries equals Albania, comma, Algeria. Note that though the above creates an array with two elements, any array can be extended by simply assigning to an entry with a new index value. For example, countries 5 equals Azerbaijan. Arrays are sparsely populated. That is, memory space is not allocated that is not used, and elements may be added out of index sequence. Array objects have a length property, which indicates the size of, that is, the number of elements in, the array. Actually, it is one more than the highest populated index number. So, for example, after the above assignment, countries.length would return a value of 6. That is, there are 6 entries numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 of which have values, 3 of which are undefined. You can define an array and specify its length this way: var countries equals new array parenthesis 193. Arrays also have a variety of methods that can be applied. Here's a few that may prove useful and/or instructive. The array push method. It adds one or more items to the end of an array. The syntax is the name of the array dot push, and in parentheses a list of items separated by commas. It modifies the named array so it consists of all the items initially in the array followed by all the entries in the argument list, and it returns the new length of the array. For example, var countries equals new array, countries 0 equals Albania, countries 1 equals Algeria, countries 5 equals Azerbaijan, len equals countries.push, Belgium, Belize. The result, len, is 8, and the entries are Albania, Algeria, undefined, 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 Azerbaijan, Belgium, Belize. The array pop method removes the last element of an array, so you specify the name of the array dot pop parent, and the function returns the removed element. For example, once again we have our var countries equals new array, and we assign values to elements number 0, 1, and 5. Gone equals countries.pop parent. The result, gone, now contains Azerbaijan, and the resulting array contains Albania, Algeria, undefined, undefined, undefined. Note that if you refer to an array by its name and do not specify an index, JavaScript converts all the entries to strings and returns a single string containing all these entries concatenated together, each entry but the last followed by a comma. So, for example, var countries equals new array parent, countries 0 is Albania, countries 1 is Algeria, countries 5 is Azerbaijan, alert, countries. It displays Albania, Algeria, Azerbaijan. The array shift method removes the first element of an array. The syntax is name the array dot shift and parentheses, and the function returns the removed element. So again, we define our array of countries and initialize it, and then we say gone equals countries dot shift. It returns Albania in gone, and countries now has 5 items: Algeria, undefined, 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 Azerbaijan. The array unshift method adds one or more items to the front of an array. Syntax is the name of the array dot unshift, and in parentheses a list of one or more items. It modifies the named array so it consists of all the entries in the argument list followed by all the items from the named array. It returns the new length of the array. Again, an example, we define initial array and initialize it. Len equals countries.unshift, Afghanistan. The result, len, contains 7 because there's now 7 entries, and the entries begin with Afghanistan, followed by the values we had before. There are others, but you get the idea. If we need additional methods, we will formally introduce them as needed. The for statement. This statement is designed to execute one or more statements for as long as some condition is true. You specify an initial value for a variable, then a test to see if the condition of interest is true, and a specification of how to step from the current item to process the next, usually incrementing an index, but other creative options are possible. The syntax is for, and then in parenthesis, setting that initial value, semicolon, specifying that test, semicolon, and then the increment, meaning how do you step to the next item. And then after that, in braces, one or more statements. So that series of statements will be executed as long as that test is true. Note there are no semicolons coded after the parentheses or after the braces, which define a block of code, but there must be a semicolon after each statement in the block. If there's only one statement to execute, the braces may be omitted, but we recommend you code them. This is what they call a pre-test kind of logic. You set the variable to an initial value and you run the test. If it returns false, you skip to the statement after the for statement. You're done. If the test returns true, execute the block of statements. Then run the increment statement and go back to step 2. This construct is typically used to step through the elements of an array. The initial condition sets the beginning index, the test looks for an ending index value, and the increment adds to or subtracts from the current index value. Let's look at an example. For, parenthesis, j equals 0, there's our initial value, semicolon, j less than countries.length, there's our test, and j equals j plus 1. That's how we get to the next item. And the code to run is this. Countries of j, that is the current array element, equals countries of j plus, and then the string literal, colon space done exclamation point. Second statement, alert. Countries plus j plus is countries j. So that will display the current value of the current entry. Some notes. Note the use of semicolons in the body of the for. Semicolon after the initial value, semicolon after the test, but no semicolon after the increment. So this initializes an index variable j to 0, so it will point to the first element in an array. It's pretty common to use variables named I or j for indexes. We're going to step through the array until j equals the length value, because then we've handled the last element. A common JavaScript shorthand for j equals j plus 1 is just j plus plus. As far as the processing statements, we first append the string colon space done exclamation point to the current element, then we display the value using the alert statement. We should analyze the alert statement a bit. Alert displays a character string. Here we code the literal countries left bracket. Then we concatenate the plus sign, the current value of j. Then we concatenate the literal right bracket space is space. Then we add the value of the element countries j. Tricky punctuation. In this video, we introduce the if and for JavaScript statements, as well as an introduction to arrays in JavaScript. With the if statement, we introduced a variety of tests for true or false, that is, literals or variables, logical expressions including equality, not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal, and less than or equal, and logical combinations using amper amper and vertical bar, and exclamation point for not. We introduced the script element as a way to define variables that are global, known everywhere in the page. With arrays, we described a variety of ways to define and initialize arrays and introduced the length property and the push, pop, shift, and unshift methods. Using the for statement, we saw how you can process all or just some of the elements of an array. In the next video, We examine how to apply DOM methods to expand and contract lists, how to define JavaScript functions, and how to set up remote scripts so they can be used by multiple web pages. See you there.